First up, we have the brand new album from Myrath with Karma. I can't believe this album's already coming out today, and it's been an album that's been in the works for quite some time. Obviously, some big changes happened with the band, not just in lineup-wise, but also musically as well. Some of the old-school Myrath fans may not appreciate what they're hearing here because it is much more accessible, it is much more commercial, and a bit more stripped down than before. But on the other hand, this is a great gateway album for people to actually start to appreciate Myrath that don't already know the power and glory that they already bring. There's so much to this album that I enjoy, and it's strange to me because on the first listen, it took me a little bit, but then I finally understood what they were going for. If this is an album that can really work, this could be an album that really makes them be able to have a chance to be able to tour in North America. And isn't that all what we want? Seriously. Give this one a shot. Next up, we have Striker with Ultrapower, the return album from this band, and I do mean a return album, because after making 6 albums in 8 years, the band decided to quietly and unofficially break up, but they got back together with a brand new lineup. In fact, 3/5 of the lineup is brand new for this recording, and the band brought some brand new magic to the band. Of course, it continues on with that traditional metal, heavy metal, revival metal sound, but they start to bring in influences of synthwave, some really crunchy, heavy guitar, and did I hear a scream or two throughout this album? I think I did. I'm so curious to see where the band's going to be going from here. This is the most diverse Striker album to date, and if this is the direction that they're going in, I couldn't be more satisfied. First up for what I missed is the band External with their debut album, Dreamscapes. Now, this was a recommendation for me, and this has so much of what I love about modern prog today. The band is taking ideas that have been used over the past 15-20 years or so, but making them completely their own. Imagine a band like Leprous, Textures, and Haken all coming together to make some very bombastic prog. Sometimes it gets into that progressive metalcore, or gent, as a lot of people like to call it, but unless that's a big minus for you, I think you can get over it pretty quickly. Because there's so much diversity throughout this album, the vocals are absolutely insane, the musicianship absolutely top notch, and this might be a very underground prog metal album, and I don't want it to be. I want people to check this thing out, and I want to see this band skyrocket. The only way that can happen is if you check it out. Up now is the band Kontact, with a K, with their debut album, First Contact. Now, this album is absolutely bonkers. Imagine the band Voivod making music in the style of Motorhead, and then deciding to also write some of the biggest 80s riffs this side of Dokken. And you have a bit of a description of what Kontact is all about. And it even goes into more extremes, like there's a ton of double bass and blast beats going on here, falsetto vocals. It's an absolutely insane album, but again, if you love what Voivod does, and you want to see them go into much different directions in an alien-like form, this is an album you must check out. I think this is going to rank pretty high in my top 100 albums of 2024, but we'll see what happens when that comes during the holiday. Next up is the band Lord Dying with Clandestine Transcendence, and a lot of people have been recommending this album as I missed this in the January video, and I totally understand why. It's nice and sludgy like a band like Mastodon in its early days. It gets nice and doomy, but a little bit of thrashy as well, like a band like High on Fire, and it even hits some death metal territory as well. Not too much, just enough. And I appreciate what's going on here as well, because if you think sludge and doom is too slow, this is an album for you because it totally picks up the speed. If death metal is not really your thing and you wish it was kind of slower and more sludgier, this is an album for you. It's like the best of both worlds, and I truly appreciate it when a band can pull something like this off. I totally understand why everyone's going bonkers over this album, and yeah, I really appreciate it, and you just might as well if this is something that you're looking for. Coming up next, we got the band Mago de Oz with Alicia and El Metalverso. I wish I could understand things a little bit better on here so I could get the full context, but with all of that said, I really enjoy this album. If you like Spanish flavored power metal, folk metal, it's got a little bit of a Celtic feel as well too, and a big old musical rock opera feel behind it. That's what this album brings. From what I understand, I think This is a concept album about Alice in Wonderland, but done a little more twisted and a little more metal, and I can always appreciate that. There's some doomy moments on here, there's like full-blown rock opera moments going on, fast, slow, everything that you could love about Mago Diaz. And if that sounds like that's something up your alley, and of course if you're not from America, you probably already know them, but just in case you don't, seriously, give this album a shot and, get more into the cultural stew of what all of the Metalverso is all about. Up next, we have the brand new album from Manticora with Mycelium, and this really feels like a return to form with the band while sounding absolutely fresh and inspired. I might even go as far to say this might be my favorite Manticora album to date, although it just came out, so I don't know if I can definitely say that, but hear me out. This is progressive power metal done right with a little more extreme elements that happen occasionally on here and some of the most melodic and super catchy riffs that you're going to hear in 2024, especially in this style. If you're not familiar with the band, imagine a band like Nevermore or Symphony X or something combined together to create something very, very dark. And I always appreciated that about Manticora, and they're doing that stronger than ever. Of course, with a new lineup change, that's going to make things a little bit different, but I think for any longtime fan of the band, this might be your favorite album of 2024. Up next is the Washington, D.C. tri-state area band Sacricide, with their debut album, Near the Flame. And this really surprised me. It's a nice throwback to that early 2000s second wave of metalcore sound, but it's updated enough with some deathcore elements, a little bit of prog and extreme elements going on there for good measure. And of course, melodies and harmonies up the yin-yang. This is some really cool stuff here, and I appreciate the fact that as much brutality is on this album, they balance it out with melodic moments, so it's got a little bit of everything. And especially for being a debut album, that is a nice throwback, but still so current. I hope a lot of people will be able to check this band out, because if you miss out on this and you're a metalcore, deathcore, extreme metal fan, I think you'll be missing out on this. Seriously. Go check it out. And finally today, for what I missed, it is the sophomore album from Vitriol, Suffer and Become. This ticks all the marks that I'm looking for in extreme metal, and their debut album was sensational and one of the best extreme metal albums that came out that year. But many years have gone by, and it's time for that sophomore album, and they got even more brutal, more extreme. Imagine the best of Nile, Hate Eternal, Anal Nathrak, and of course Vitriol themselves, and they put out one of the most brutal albums of 2024 with insane technicality, jaw-dropping musicianship, the songwriting is impeccable, and it's got the right amount of melodic moments going on there throughout all of it. Seriously, this is just one of those albums that I think come the end of the year, everyone is going to be going crazy for as the best extreme metal album of 2024, and if I'm wrong, I'd be happy to be proven wrong, but until then, seriously, give this one a shot. First up, we have the third album from Morbid Saint, with Swallowed by Hell. Yes, this third album from the band might be a surprise because they are a long-running band, and they sound like one of those legacy bands that have a mountain of music, but with this only being the third album, they really show that it's all about quality, not quantity. And I dare say, after having the album as long as I have, and with future feelings, I feel like this is the best Morbid Saint album to date. And I know that might be heresy to some, but listen, it's got amazing production, the songwriting is spectacular, it feels like there's so much life to the band on this album in 2024. And what's a better way to be able to show off one of the best thrash underground bands that has almost a sense of death metal to them than to be able to praise them the way that they deserve. This is Morbid Saint at their best. Coming up next, we got the brand new album from the Pineapple Thief with It Leads to This. This seminal prog band is still going strong after 16 albums, and it's just amazing to see. Imagine a prog alternative mix, so kind of like Porcupine Tree meets Radiohead, and all those kind of bands all morphed together, but the Pineapple Thief was one of the first bands to do it right. And for some reason, this album feels like they cut off some of the fat on this album, which is strange to say because it clocks in at roughly the same time as most of their other albums at around 40 minutes throughout their entire discography. But this time, again, it just feels right. It's hard-hitting, It's straight to the point, it's emotional, it's everything that you would want out of a Pineapple Thief album. And I just can't say it any better than that. This is how you do prog rock right. Listen to it for yourself. Next up, we have the debut album from Red Temple Prey with Can It Get Any Worse? It's got this great alternative rock, alternative metal, shoegaze kind of feel to it. Musically, it reminds me of more of the somber, slow, mid-tempo moments of Torche, without getting into the doom stuff. More of the shoegaze era of Torche, which I truly appreciate what they're going on here for. I'm sure there's more like 90s alternative bands you could compare them to, but I like saying Torche for this reason. It's a somber album, it's a lot of coming of age kind of moments going on, which I truly appreciate, and just kind of the state of the world that we're living in right now, both personal and worldwide. It's not every day you get an album like this, and I love seeing where the band is at. The most mellow album that I probably have the entire list, but it's well worth your time if you want to explore. Coming up next is a sophomore album from Spectral voice known as Sparagmos, and this is my introduction into the band, and all I can say is holy crap, what an album. It captures what I love about the death doom sound. It gets into extreme territories at the same time. It's polar opposites that feels like it shouldn't work, but they find a way to really make it so. I mean, it gets into near funeral doom territory at moments. It gets into hyperspeed, hyperblast metal at times as well. And of course, the lyrical content really makes you think. Everything about this album is something that I appreciate as an extreme metal fan. And if you're not familiar with this Denver outfit, I really think you should give them a chance. It covers the wide spectrum of metal in such a great way to the extremes. And if you need something like that in your life, you need this album. Is the brand new album from Stygian Crown with Funeral for a King. This album is another one of those doom albums that caught me completely off guard, and I love it so much for that reason. It's got that great epic doom feeling behind it, yet it almost goes into slow, brutal death metal at the same time. I guess the way you can describe this is, imagine the epicness of the Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus of something like Candlemass, but match it up sometimes with the precision and musicality of Bolt Thrower. There's no screams on this album, it's all clean vocals, but just imagine that musically. It doesn't feel like it should fit, but it fits together so perfectly. This is the kind of album that if you're not a Doom fan, but you are a death metal fan, I think you can find something to appreciate about this album, and hopefully, the rest of the metal world will agree. And finally, for the albums that come out today, is the brand new album from Takeda with the Agony Flame. This is my first round with the band, and it's awesome to see what they're able to accomplish here. Apparently, over in Sweden, these guys are a big deal, but over here in the States, not that big of a commotion. Hopefully that'll change with this album review. All that said, I love what the band does here, at least particularly on this album. I'm gonna have to go back and check out the rest of it. This has like a really dark, almost gothic kind of feel behind it. I can hear bands like Sentenced and Him behind this album, yet I can also hear top 40 rock radio at the same time. It's such an interesting mix, and especially, at least to me, the keys really stand out the most to me on this album. If you're looking for something that could be radio rock, but just has a little bit of a goth tinge to it, you really need to check out Talk. And starting that off is the debut album from Ad Nihilum with An Escape for the Guilty. Now this is another one of those albums that goes into a lot of extremes in that black and doom metal sound. Yeah, there's black metal, there's death metal, there's doom metal. It's all combined together in this glorious, unholy sound that just works so perfectly if you like things on the extreme end of things. You got your wicked double bass, you got your growls and screams, you got your slow, epic moments that you hear in doom metal, all combined together in a rock but clear production, songwriting that's absolutely mesmerizing, and a package that is not for the weak of heart. But for those that can really enjoy something like this has gotta be up your alley. Black and doom metal isn't the most accessible genre, but it should. Up next is the fourth album from the band Darkhaven, known as 4. Now, this is an album that is my first foray into the band, but I really love what they're doing here. I can hear 90s and 2000s melodeath going on here, but also at the right times, in the right choruses, I hear commercial top 40 hard rock. None of this should make sense, but it makes sense in all the right ways when you listen to it. It's so catchy, it could get people easily acceptable into metal if they're a rock fan, and vice versa. This is a great middle ground for showing people either side of the border when it comes to heavy music, and I'm all for that. Taking in mind the fact that the music's great, the production is cool, everything about this just hits in the right way. If you're looking for something that balances metal and rock perfectly, give this one a shot. Next up, we have the band Dead Yellow with their sophomore album, What's Left of Them. And this might be my favorite album of everything that I talk about today. This captures everything that I love about the atmospheric black metal, black gaze, post-black metal sound. I haven't been so intrigued by a black gaze album like this since Vatnet Viscar's Sky Swallower in 2013, and I hold that album to such a high regard. Of course, I hold Settler even better than that, but I was already familiar with that. But let me continue on here. There's so much to love about this album. The production is so clear, but just raw enough. The precision of the musicianship is top notch. Everyone in the band is just playing absolutely killer, and this is what this style of black metal is all about. I'd be amazed if anyone can outdo this kind of black metal album in this style in 2024. And finally today, we're ending on some power metal with the Grandmaster and their sophomore album, Black Sun. Another brand new band to me anyways, as I should have known about this band considering the guitarist of Edguy is a part of this album, and it's an all-star cast from members of Fate, Mind's Key, and a huge name at Frontiers Music. All of this is right up my alley. This is just fun, heavy metal, melodic heavy metal, and of course, power metal. Just done to an absolute T. Lyrically, it hits the gut a little bit. It's about the times that we live in right now, but it's not silly, it's not too serious. It's right in the middle where it's just fun to listen to. And I miss power metal albums like this, where you can just have fun listening to it from start to finish. I easily need to go back to the debut, and you should check out the Grandmaster if you're looking for some fun power metal as well. First up, we have the brand new album from Bokassa, known as All Out of Dreams. This album took me by complete surprise. This is the first time I'm really familiar with the band, and I'm really enjoying what I'm hearing. It's fun, it's catchy, it can be fast as pop punk, it can be as slow as sludgy, stoner rock. It's got so many layers to it, and quite tongue-in-cheek when you think about it as well. It's the kind of album where they're not afraid to play what they want to play, write what they want to write, and it all comes off sounding fantastic. If you want something a little more lighthearted, but doesn't skimp on the musicianship, this is an album for you. Next up, we have the debut album from the Italian power metal band, Electra Storm, with Power Lord. And this album is a perfect display of what I love about power metal. Symphonic in the right moments, power metal of course, gorgeous vocals, the choruses, everything going on. This is why I enjoy power metal so much. From David of Sin Heresy, it's great to see him tackling a different side of his power metal and symphonic styles, really gauging into the power metal side, and I truly enjoy it. This is the kind of stuff where if you find power metal kind of lacking for different reasons, this is one that shows you that power metal will never truly die. Next up, we're sticking with Germany with the band Farsot and their brand new album, Life Promised Death. This black metal band has been around for a bit of time, and they just continuously improve with every single album. And I really feel that way about this one, as I do feel it is their best work to date. The production has that raw but perfect black metal sound behind it. The songwriting just works so perfectly. It has that great mix of old school black metal, a little bit of second wave black metal in there, and a couple other influences that you might hear as you check it out. There's a lot to really appreciate about an album like this, and being a longtime Farsot fan, it's great to see the band continuing on here in 2024. And if you're not familiar, you need to check this thing out immediately. Next up, we have the third album from this German melodeath band known as Far Beyond with The End of My Road. And yeah, if you haven't figured it out by the title alone, this is a very dark album. Perfectly matches that melodeath sound, a little bit of a raw production, but it does sound clear and pristine at the same time. The songwriting is excellent on this album. It's not a cheery album by any means, but If you love the sad melodeath stuff, this is going to be right up your alley. I've just discovered this band and I can't wait to go back and check out the previous releases. If they're anywhere near as good as this album, I know I'm sold on checking out some brand new melodeath. But until then, check this album out as it just came out today. It's some really good stuff. Up next, we have the self-titled album from Ihsan. And this is arguably my favorite album of 2024 so far, although there's a lot of contenders already in January and February. But with all that said, this has those classic, progressive, experimental moments that I love so much from Ihsan. But on top of all of that is this symphonic black metal element that won't go away, nor should it. It is just another side of Ihsan being able to incorporate more of what he helped create with symphonic black metal, but of course being his abstract self. I couldn't ask for anything more, but he gave us more, as there's 2 discs to this album. One that does have the symphonic black metal sound, and one that is a symphonic album. Both are absolutely incredible and well worth your time if you check them out. Is this the best Ihsan album? I think there's the potential that it is, but you'll have to give it a shot for yourself to see if it's for you. Up next is the sophomore album from Illumishade, with Another Side of You. And I really feel they live up to the album title this time around. As you may or may not know, this features present members of Helveti, and I really enjoy Helveti, but it's also great to see them being able to expand into other sounds as well instead of just folk metal. This album is full of like 80s AOR, it's filled with prog metal elements, it's filled with pop moments and very beautiful piano driven moments as well. It's kind of like when you combine 80s AOR, Haken, and Vanessa Carlton into one album. It's an odd mix on paper, but it's perfect in execution. Seriously, this might be an underground album for a lot of people, but you should definitely give this one a shot, as it just might be one of the best prog albums of 2023. Just give it some time. And finally, for the albums out today, this week, is the French band Sujin with Save Our Souls. This album is very intriguing to me, as it combines melodic death metal, Japanese influence, and metalcore all combined. It's like you take the best elements of melodeath and metalcore, and you have this great Japanese influence on top of all of it that really gives it a unique twist that you don't see in a lot of other bands. The songs are so catchy, the riffs are insane. This is the kind of band that I can just see flourishing in years to come. But right here, with this debut album, it is some fantastic work. I can understand why it wouldn't be for everybody, but if you are a bit more open-minded than the rest, you should give this one a shot, and you might find a new favorite band. Up first is the debut album from this Mexican band known as Bright, with Blight. This album is a deranged combination. It is post-black, but it is also the epitome of shoegaze at the same time. Now, a lot of people would think it's black gaze, and you are probably right, but I hear so much shoegaze over top of the black metal, and I hear black metal moments over the shoegaze at the same time. It feels like such a contrast compared to a lot of atmospheric black metal, post-black, and shoegaze-inspired black metal bands. This band does it right where it almost has that great alternative tinge to black metal. Now, that could throw some people off, but for those that might have some interest in this, I really think you should give this album a shot. It won't be for everyone, but if you want one of the most relaxing black metal albums of 2024, here you go. Up next is the sophomore album from Deathless with The Clairvoyant. Now, this is pure American melodeath, and I mean that in the best way possible, but you also gotta understand, like, there is pure Black Dahlia worship on this album, there's pure Revocation worship on this album, but the band also expands their sound on this album compared to their debut. You hear more elements of what the band is trying to go for, more of the styles that really change the tempo up and the style and everything that's going on. But of course, that American melodeath sound is here in strides. All of that said, I love American melodeath. I love what they're doing here. Thrashy enough, death metal enough, progressive and technical enough, and super melodic in the right moments. What else could you possibly ask for in a genre like this? Seriously, check this album out. Up next is some brand new epic doom from the debut album from Distorted Reflection with Doom Rules Eternally. And yes, Yes, it does. This is an awesome combination of epic doom metal, as there's a lot of bands that do epic doom metal that really draw inspiration from Candlemass, and I'm all here for it as they are the masters of epic doom metal. But they do something with a little bit of a twist. There's more variation in the sound, there's more variation in the tempo, and the vocals remind me so much of Hansi from Blind Guardian. It's a really odd mix to think of Candlemass and Blind Guardian together, but when you hear it, it works so perfectly well. Even those who don't like Doom can find something to appreciate about this album. Seriously, this one's flying under the radar, but I'm here to try to give a little more inspiration for you to check it out. Seriously. This is fantastic stuff. And finally, we have some more black metal for you with the band The Infernal Sea with Helfenlick. I actually did an interview for this album, which you can check out on this very channel, and I hope you do, as it is a very cool interview to be able to learn so much more about the horrors of the past, something we should be learning about now. And wouldn't you know it, that is the concept of this album as well, focusing around the madman known as Witchfinder General, and all of the murders in his name and in the name of God. Match that up with some of the most dark, evil black metal you can imagine, sorrowful emotions, and lyrics that are just so vivid they play in your head as you hear the songs. This is not an album for the faint of heart, but if you are a black metal fan who loves great production, learning about the past, or even if you just have a fancy for religious murder, this might be an album for you. First up, we have the 7th album from Myrath, known as The Catalyst. The band has been quite polarizing over the years for their display of modern metal, pop, and everything else that goes into their sound. The band has experimented many times over the course of their albums, but I gotta feel like this album is probably the most consistent album the band has made. Olaf, Alicia, and company have really focused in on what works for the band, really making poppy, catchy riffs, getting heavy at the right moments, and just showing that they can have fun while doing all of it. While I'm not sure how this will rank as far as like the best Myrath album, if you are into the band, this should give you nothing but a good time. Next up, we have Borknagar with Fall. Can you believe this is the band's 12th album? I have a hard time believing that, but there goes the ravages of age. This is possibly the most experimental the band has gotten in quite some time. You get the black metal side, you get the folk metal side, you get the heavy metal and progressive metal sides going on, but there's so much more to it. There's so much atmosphere going on, and you can tell the band really wanted to come back strong after their last album. ICS Vortex is sounding as pristine as ever, and of course the rest of the band, how could you leave them out? This could be my favorite Borknagar album in time. It's a little too early to say that, but I think it will happen, and you'll see it pretty high up in my top 100 albums of 2024. Next up, we have Darkest Tower with Perpetual Terminal. I can't believe this is the band's 10th album. Again, this year is really showing that bands of my generation have put out a lot of albums. But I will say with Darkest Hour, this might be one of the best albums that they've ever put out. You can tell the pandemic really affected them and they really wanted to strive to be the best band that they possibly could be. And on album number 10, they've done so. The riffs are so hard-hitting, the lyrics are so angry and emotional. You can really hear the metalcore sound of yesteryear and what's going on today with the band. They focus in on what they do best, and they just put out that killer second wave metalcore that we all know and love. Darkest Hour might not be the biggest name of that second wave metalcore scene, but they've always been one of my favorites, and you should check them out. Up next, we have Hand of Kaliak with Kareviken. And I really hope I pronounced that right. Yes, this sophomore album from this duo is fantastic stuff if you love folk metal, especially of the early 21st century folk metal, kind of along the lines of a band like Helveti. I really hear a lot of Spirit and Solania on this album, which makes me very happy. Yes, the black metal sound, the folk metal sound, the very gorgeous vocals mixed in with the demonic vocals just work so perfectly together. It feels like the best of Scotland all thrown in together. While this album may be going under the radar for some people, it shows that folk metal is still just as strong as ever in 2024, even if you have to look for it just a little bit more. Seriously, if you need your folk metal fix, this is the album for you. Next up, we have the return album from Job for a Cowboy with Moon Healer. This comes out 10 years later, after the band might have broken up after the album Sun Eater. Well, a lot of things have changed, and I'm glad to see the band back, putting out their most mature album to date. Of course, being one of the first bands to really be known for the deathcore sound, the band has really evolved into this technical, progressive death metal sound that really harkens back all the way to the 90s prog death sound into brand new stuff that you would not imagine from the band. Everyone is technical and precise on this album. The production is so perfect for this genre, and it's great to see the band back, because if the band had ended on Sun Eater, they did end on their top note, but they have come back and they might have even peaked over that. Time will tell. But until then, if you've been waiting for this band to come back, or if you just need some great technical progressive death metal, Job for a Cowboy's here with Moon Healer. Up next is Vina with 2 Wings of Ember. This is another side project from LVT. Funny how I talked about Illumishade last week, and now we're talking about Tvina, and I really enjoy what's going on here. Kind of a polar opposite sound than what you would expect from either band. It's a bit more folkish, but it also incorporates a lot of different styles, mainly kind of focusing on like ancient folk sounds, very Celtic sounds going on as well, very tribal, but it all fits together. It's very poppy, very catchy, and as you go throughout the album, there's a lot of experimentation going on. And it's great to see the other members of LVT being able to really spread their wings and be able to show different sides of themselves. That said, we still need a new LVT album ASAP. But if you liked Illumishade, you might like Tvina. Hey, it's some great stuff. Next up, we have the brand new album from Art of Anarchy with Let There Be Anarchy. Now, this band has gone through so many transitions over the years. The first album featured Scott Weiland on vocals, one of his last vocal appearances. The second album featured Scott Stapp, who is now back with Creed. Now this third album, also having to have a Scott in the name, Jeff Scott Soto is now the lead singer of the band, and it feels like the band got tremendously heavier, almost kind of going off of Sons of Apollo, which Bumblefoot and Jeff Scott Soto were a part of at one point in time. This album is also super catchy as well too, but it's a lot more cinematic, a lot more heavy, not so much on the prog side, but going after the heavy metal side. And one of their singles features Cuba Gooding Jr. in an acting role. Bet you didn't see that one coming. Overall, I do enjoy this album, and I love the direction that Bumblefoot has taken this, but where are they going to go next? Up next is the third album from In Autumn with What's Done Is Done. Now, this is a brand new discovery to me, and you know how much I love my doom metal. This is some fantastic stuff, really encapsulating that doom metal sound, but also adding some atmospheric post-metal on top of it as well. It really adds some great atmosphere and cinematic moments on top of some tragedy, which is right up my alley. This whole album is downtrodden, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And for those that are looking for that doom metal sound, but want a little bit more variety than what you're used to, I think this is an album that you should really give a shot. And finally today, we have the brand new album from Vanir with Epitome. This album took me by complete surprise, as this is the first time I've heard the band, and I really regret that, as I really need to go back and check out the 6 previous albums. Starting off as more of a Viking metal band and becoming more of a symphonic melodeath band, this is something that should have been right up my alley from the get-go, and wouldn't you know it, with Epitome, it truly is. I love everything that's going on here, from the epic choruses, the symphonic moments, that melodeath sound of that 90s melodeath sound matched in with some more 2024 flavorings. I couldn't ask for anything more off of an album like this. It just captures so much of what I love about these genres, with great production, songwriting, and technical ability. If you're looking for something a bit more underground, unless you're completely stupid like I am and completely missed the boat with Vanir, you need to check out Epitome immediately.